All right. You wanted to break down last night's debate, and like always, the economy took center stage. What did you make of Harris and Trump's back and forth?
Well, right off the bat, you saw two completely different economic philosophies on display.
Like those dueling speeches, right?
Yeah, Harris is pushing what she calls an opportunity economy, right?
Sure.
Affordable housing, support for small businesses, helping working families get ahead.
And I bet that's resonating with a lot of people, especially after that story she told about her friends struggling to keep their business going.
Exactly. It's all about making economic policy relatable, hitting people where they live. Now Trump, he's got a different playbook entirely. He keeps going back to this idea of restoring past economic glory.
Right. Make America Great Again, Part 2. So where do tariffs fit into all of this? He hasn't let go of that.
Not one bit. He's convinced tariffs are the way to get countries like China to, and I quote, pay their fair share. But is it really that simple?
Harris doesn't think so. Remember when she called his tariff strategy a hidden national sales tax?
Oh yeah, she went there.
And even put a pretty hefty price tag on it, something like $4,000 more a year for the average family.
Which is a powerful argument. And she's not alone. Economists have been saying for years that while tariffs might sound good initially, those costs often end up hitting consumers right in the wallet. Higher prices for everyone.
And Trump's response.
Well, he doubled down. Basically said, they're not going to have higher prices. China and all the countries that have been ripping us off for years will.
Oh,
Which, if you think about it,
is vintage Trump.
exactly. Both candidates are playing to emotions, but in very different ways. Harris is selling a vision, right? Things can get better if we make the right investments.
And Trump. It feels like he's still drawing on that same sense of grievance that got him elected in the first place.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
That America's been wronged somehow, taken advantage of, and that he's the only one who can fix it. He's appealing to a very specific kind of frustration, a longing for a time when, at least in their minds, America was unquestionably on top.
And it's a strategy that clearly works for his base. But will it resonate more broadly? Especially when you have someone like Harris offering what seems like a more optimistic and collaborative path forward.
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question. One thing's for sure. This debate highlighted the stark contrast between their economic visions. Both are vying for the hearts, minds, and most importantly, the votes of the American people.
But whoa, things got even more, let's just say, intense when the topic switched over to abortion. You wanted to make sure we dug into this one, and for good reason.
It was a powder keg, no doubt. You had Trump, right, taking credit for the overturning of Roe v. Wade, even calling himself, get this, the most pro-life president in American history.
And Harris on the other side making it crystal clear that if she's elected, she'd codify Roe's protections, essentially making it the law of the land.
A pretty stark difference. And this isn't just some abstract debate for a lot of people.
Exactly. And Harris really brought that home, didn't she? I mean, when she talked about women being denied care for miscarriages because doctors are terrified of legal trouble under these new abortion bans, it was pretty chilling.
Definitely. She wants to shift the conversation away from all those theoretical arguments,
Yeah.
about when life begins and all that.
Right.
And put the focus squarely on the real-world consequences these bans are having on women. This is about control over their own bodies. Then you had Trump using some really inflammatory language, saying Democrats support abortion up to the 9th month, even tossing around phrases like execute the baby.
Whoa. And we have to point out that kind of language is not only deeply offensive to many, it's also just not accurate. Late-term abortions are incredibly rare, and they're almost always done because the mother's life is at risk or the fetus has severe abnormalities.
Absolutely. It's about painting the left as extreme as dangerous. Remember when he called Harris a Marxist? Classic Trump tactic, trying to drum up fear.
Yeah, the Marxist label felt like a stretch, even for him. I mean, come on.
Right. But we can't ignore that this kind of rhetoric works. It taps into those deep-seated fears, anxieties about change, about, I don't know, the future or something.
And it's hard not to notice all of Trump's interruptions, especially when Harris was trying to speak. It's like that, excuse me,
Yeah.
became his catchphrase.
Oh, yeah.
Almost comical. But I also think he's trying to control the conversation, even if it means talking over everyone.
There's a power move. Right.
Yeah.
And it plays well with his base, who see it as strength. But to others, it just comes off as disrespectful, even bullying, which, leads us to immigration. Another hot-button issue.
Yeah, immigration, always a lightning rod issue, and this debate was no different.
For sure. And, it really highlights the contrast in how each candidate sees America's place in the world. Its values, its identity, all of that.
Right. Yeah.
Harris, she's all about a more compassionate approach, talking about tackling the root causes of migration, what's happening down in Central America.
And she even called Trump out for shooting down that bipartisan border security bill, the one she supported a while back. I remember that one. It actually had some good ideas in it.
Exactly. Her point was Trump would rather use immigration to score political points than actually try to solve the problem.
Okay. But then Trump, well, he made some pretty out there claims, even for him.
Right, like that whole thing about immigrants causing crime rates to go up.
Yeah, wasn't that debunked?
Totally. The FBI's own data shows violent crime has actually been going down.
Mm-hmm.
But Trump just called the statistics fraudulent.
And then there was that whole thing about immigrants eating the dogs of American families. He used Springfield, Ohio, as an example.
Which officials in Springfield were quick to point out never happened. Like, it just goes to show.
Go ahead.
It just goes to show facts only get you so far sometimes. You know, when people are afraid, when they feel like their way of life is slipping away.
We'll latch onto anything that confirms those fears.
Exactly. And that kind of fear, it's powerful fuel, especially for a certain segment of the electorate.
Which, when you think about it, is a stark contrast to Harris's message of, unity and working together.
Absolutely. And that difference in leadership styles, that clash between these two completely different versions of reality, it was never more obvious than when they talked about January 6th.
Man, that was intense.
It was like watching two ships passing in the night. You had Harris, who was actually at the Capitol that day, right there when it happened, and she's accusing Trump of directly inciting an attack on democracy.
And Trump, pretty much what you'd expect. Downplaying his role, even trying to blame it on Nancy Pelosi. We're living in two different worlds.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder about the future, right? I mean, you've got Trump still pushing that election fraud narrative, even after all the courts threw those cases out.
So where does that leave us?
At a crossroads, I'd say. You've got Harris. She's offering this vision of unity, of moving forward, getting back to normal. Trump, on the other hand, he's still clinging to this idea that the system's rigged against him and his supporters. And then there's foreign policy. Remember that whole exchange about Ukraine?
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
Trump said he could end the war in 24 hours, just like that.
While Harris basically called him weak, said he'd just give in to Putin, even said he would just give it up. That's not who we are as Americans. Powerful stuff.
It was. She's trying to rally Americans around this idea of the country as a global leader, standing up for democracy.
And Trump. It's all about America first, right? Like, he kept talking about how much world leaders supposedly respect him.
Which Harris countered by saying those same leaders told her they don't respect him at all.
Yeah.
It really gets to the heart of how differently they see America's role in the world.
So, wow, we covered a lot of ground here. Two very different visions for the future, two candidates who couldn't be more different. It's almost like
choosing between two completely different paths. And for you listening, that's the big question, isn't it? Which path do you believe in? Which future do you want to see? Something to think about, especially with the election just around the corner.